The desert planet looked endless from above. Golden sand stretched in every direction, broken only by sharp rocks and dunes that rolled like frozen waves. A small human ship descended from the sky, leaving a trail of dust as it landed near a flat stretch of land. The ship opened its ramp, and 4 explorers stepped out into the burning light. Their leader was named Myra. She was steady and calm, with eyes always searching for detail. Beside her was Dan, the strongest in the group, carrying heavy equipment on his back. The third was Lena, who liked to study old writings and patterns. The last was Tom, who handled the tools and machines they needed for digging and scanning. The 4 stood together and looked toward the horizon. In the distance, something tall broke the flat line of the desert. At first it seemed like a mountain of sand, but the closer they came, the more its shape grew sharp and precise. The team walked for hours until they reached it, and then they stopped in awe. Before them rose a pyramid. It was massive, its sides smooth and angled perfectly, as if carved by careful hands. Unlike the old pyramids on Earth, this one was made of black stone that shimmered faintly in the sunlight. Even after thousands of years, its walls stood untouched by wind or sand. "This is not natural," Lena whispered, running her hand over the surface. The stone felt warm, almost alive, like it held power inside. Dan placed a scanner against the wall, and the device lit up. "No cracks, no weakness," he said. "This thing was built to last forever." They walked around the pyramid, tracing its edges until they found a narrow doorway. The frame of the door was covered with deep carvings, strange shapes that looked like stars, circles, and lines crossing each other. Myra bent closer to study them. "These are not random marks," she said. "They tell a story. Or maybe a warning." Lena brought out her small screen and began to capture the carvings. She loved patterns, and her mind worked quickly, trying to make sense of them. "This is older than anything we know," she murmured. "Older than the oldest human history." Tom tapped the door itself. It was a heavy slab, sealed tightly, but he noticed a small groove in the center. He pressed his hand against it, and suddenly the carvings glowed faintly, as if responding to his touch. The team stepped back in shock. The glow faded after a few seconds, leaving the door as dark and silent as before. "That was not an accident," Myra said firmly. "This place knows we are here." The sun sank lower in the sky, but the explorers did not rest. They set up camp at the base of the pyramid. Lights from their ship glowed softly in the night, while the black walls of the pyramid loomed above them like a giant shadow. None of them slept much, their minds restless with questions. In the morning, they returned to the door. Dan used his strength to push against it, but it did not move. Tom tried his tools, pressing machines against the stone, but nothing worked. The pyramid seemed to resist all their efforts. Then Lena noticed something. "Look at the carvings again," she said. She pointed to a set of circles etched into the side. "They look like the same pattern of stars we saw last night." The group studied them carefully. The circles were not random, they matched the sky above the planet. Myra realized the pyramid was designed to open only when the stars were in the right position. "We need to wait for the right moment," she said. As the day passed, the explorers prepared. They stood ready when the sun fell again and the stars came out. Slowly, one by one, the stars aligned with the circles on the door. The carvings began to glow once more, brighter this time, spreading like veins of light across the surface. The ground shook softly. Sand slid from the pyramid as the heavy slab began to move. A slow grinding sound filled the air, and the doorway opened just enough for a person to enter. A gust of cool air rushed out, carrying with it a smell of stone and age. The team looked at each other. Their hearts beat fast, but none of them stepped back. This was the reason they had come so far. Myra raised her light and led the way inside. The others followed, their steps echoing in the narrow hall. The walls glowed faintly with lines of energy, guiding them deeper into the pyramid. The air grew heavier with every step. The silence pressed against their ears, broken only by the sound of their breathing. The explorers felt as if they were walking into the heart of something ancient, something that had been waiting for them for a very long time. Finally, the tunnel opened into a vast chamber. The light from their lamps spread across the room, and what they saw froze them in place. Piles of skeletons filled the chamber, stretched across the floor like fallen soldiers of another time. The explorers stood frozen at the edge of the chamber. Their lights shone across the wide room, and the sight made their hearts pound faster. Skeletons lay everywhere. Some were piled together in heaps, while others stretched out alone, arms reaching as if they had been trying to escape. Myra stepped forward first. Her boots crunched on the stone floor, echoing loudly in the heavy silence. She raised her light higher and studied the bones carefully. These were not human skeletons. Their arms were longer than any person's, their ribs wider, and their skulls stretched back in strange shapes. Some even had sharp edges along their arms, like natural blades. "These are not from Earth," Myra said in a steady voice. Dan swallowed hard. He was the strongest of the group, but even he felt uneasy looking at so many empty faces staring from the ground. "How many are there?" he asked, his voice low. "Hundreds," Lena whispered as she counted the heaps. She crouched down near one of the skeletons, careful not to touch it, and studied the skull. These creatures were warriors. Look at the way their bones are built. They were made for battle. Tom moved his light across the chamber walls. Strange markings covered the stone, different from the carvings outside. They looked more like scenes, painted in lines of glowing dust. "There is something here," he said. "These pictures tell a story." The others gathered around as Tom brushed away the sand covering part of the wall. The glowing lines formed an image of two groups fighting. One group looked like the skeletons lying on the ground, with long arms and sharp skulls. The other group looked smaller, their shapes less clear but surrounded by a shining light. "This was not a tomb," Lena said slowly. "This was a battle." The silence around them grew heavier, as if the pyramid itself was listening. Their lights flickered, and the air seemed colder. Dan took a deep breath. If this was a battle, then who won? "Because the losers are right in front of us." Myra studied the walls longer. The glowing dust formed a final image, showing the strange warriors being trapped inside by a wave of light. She touched the carving gently. "The builders sealed them here. Maybe to keep them from escaping." The explorers exchanged nervous glances. The chamber was not just a room of bones, it was a prison. They walked deeper, stepping carefully around the skeletons. Some lay against the walls as if they had clawed at the stone in their last moments. Others sat upright, their skulls tilted back in silent screams. The chamber stretched far, and the deeper they went, the stronger the strange silence grew. It was not the silence of an empty cave. It was a heavy silence, pressing against their ears and hearts, as though something was holding its breath. Tom's scanner beeped suddenly, making all of them jump. He looked at the small screen and frowned. "There is still energy here," he said. "Something is active under the floor." Lena looked down. "Energy after all these years?" That means the pyramid is still alive. The thought sent a shiver through all of them. They were standing in a place that was not dead, but waiting. Myra stopped at the center of the chamber. A large stone table stood there, cracked but still solid. On it lay 3 skeletons, different from the others. They were dressed in what looked like armor, their bones wrapped in faint traces of metal that had not rusted. These were leaders, Myra said softly. Maybe generals of their kind. The explorers studied the armored skeletons in silence. It was clear now that this chamber was not a place of rest. It was a memory of war, locked away for reasons they could only guess. Then a sound broke the silence. It was faint, like a whisper of air through a crack, but in that heavy chamber it felt as loud as thunder. The explorers spun around, lights shaking as they searched for the source. The sound came again, this time from the far corner. It was not air. It was a rattle, soft and uneven, like bone touching stone. Dan raised his tool defensively. "Tell me you all heard that." "I heard it," Lena whispered, clutching her scanner. Myra kept her eyes on the skeletons around them. None had moved, but the silence felt different now, sharper, alive. She lifted her hand. "Stay together," she ordered. The team stepped back toward each other, forming a small circle in the middle of the chamber. Their lights shook across the bones, making shadows stretch across the walls like reaching hands. For a long moment, nothing happened. The sound was gone, and the silence returned heavier than before. The explorers stood still, waiting, listening, their breaths shallow. Then the glow on the walls changed. The lines of dust shifted, forming new patterns. The images of battle melted away, replaced by a single symbol glowing bright in the darkness. It was a circle of light, surrounding a dark shape in the center. Lena's voice shook as she spoke. "It looks like a seal." The air in the chamber grew colder, and the bones around them seemed to press closer. The explorers realized the pyramid was not showing them the past anymore. It was warning them about the present. Something inside this chamber was not finished. The explorers stood close together, their lights shaking across the chamber. The walls glowed with the strange seal symbol, bright enough to cast pale light over the piles of bones. The silence pressed harder now, so thick it made their ears ache. Then it happened. One of the skeletons near the far wall shifted. It was only a small movement at first, the faint sound of bone tapping stone. But in the still chamber, the sound was sharp and clear. Myra froze in place, her heart racing. "Did you see that?" Dan asked, his voice tight. "Yes," Myra answered. Her hand tightened around her light. "Everyone stay calm." The skeleton twitched again, its long arms sliding slightly over the floor. Dust lifted into the air. The explorers could not look away. The empty skull tilted upward, and faint light flickered in its hollow eyes. Lena gasped. "That is not natural." Tom raised his scanner quickly. The screen blinked with strange signals. "Energy surge," he whispered. "Something is waking up." The team stepped back carefully, trying not to make sudden noise. But the pyramid seemed to respond anyway. The glowing seal on the wall pulsed once, sending a wave of light across the chamber. For a moment, every skeleton seemed to glow faintly, as if touched by fire inside their bones. The explorers stood in shock. Hundreds of bones glimmered in the dim chamber, and the sight filled them with both fear and wonder. Dan broke the silence. "This place is waking them up. We should leave now before all of them rise." But Myra shook her head. Her eyes stayed on the glowing seal. "No. The pyramid is not just attacking us. It is watching us. Testing us. The others stared at her, confused. Think about it, Myra continued. Why did the door open only when the stars aligned? Why did the wall show us the battle? Why is only one skeleton moving while the others stay still? It is not trying to kill us. It is trying to see what we will do. Lena frowned, still clutching her scanner. You think this is a trial? Yes, Myra said. A test to measure us. Before anyone could answer, the moving skeleton began to rise slowly. Its bones clicked together as invisible energy pulled them into shape. Dust fell from its ribs as it stood upright. The faint light in its eyes grew brighter, casting pale beams across the chamber. The explorers held their breath. The skeleton did not charge. It simply stood, facing them, silent and still. Tom whispered, "It is waiting for us." Myra stepped forward carefully, keeping her light steady. She felt every muscle in her body tense, but she refused to show fear. "We come in peace," she said firmly, her voice echoing through the chamber. The skeleton's head tilted slightly, as if it understood. Then its arm rose and pointed toward the glowing seal on the wall. The explorers turned to look. The seal pulsed again, brighter this time. The dark shape in its center twisted, shifting into a new form. It looked like a locked gate surrounded by chains. Lena's eyes widened. "It is showing us something trapped inside." Dan clenched his fists. "Or warning us to stay out." The skeleton lowered its arm and stepped back, returning to stillness. The light in its eyes faded until only faint sparks remained. Slowly, it sank down again, folding onto the ground like a puppet with its strings cut. The chamber grew silent once more. The explorers exchanged tense glances. None of them spoke for a long time. Finally, Myra broke the silence. "It is clear now. This place is alive in some way. It remembers what happened here, and it wants to know what we will do." Tom looked down at his scanner. The energy readings are stronger than ever. Whatever power runs this pyramid has not weakened after all these years. It could last forever. Lena's voice was soft but firm. "That means this is no simple ruin. This is a machine. A living machine built by something far older and smarter than us." Dan turned to Myra. "Then the question is, do we keep going, or do we turn back before it tests us again?" Myra did not answer right away. She walked to the center of the chamber and looked around at the piles of bones. Hundreds of warriors had been sealed here, trapped by the builders of the pyramid. Yet the structure had not destroyed them. Instead, it had preserved them, waiting. Her eyes returned to the glowing seal on the wall. "We cannot turn back now. We have seen too much. If this is a test, then humanity must face it. If we pass, we may gain knowledge greater than anything we know." The others hesitated, but Myra's resolve was strong, and slowly they nodded. The chamber was silent again, but none of them believed it would stay that way for long. They felt it deep inside. The pyramid had only just begun its trial. The explorers gathered near the glowing seal. Its light filled the chamber, making the piles of bones look like frozen shadows. Myra stood at the front, her eyes fixed on the strange design. The shape of a locked gate surrounded by chains pulsed with steady rhythm, as if it were alive. Lena stepped closer and studied the walls. More carvings spread out from the seal, hidden before under layers of dust. She brushed them carefully with her glove. As the carvings were revealed, faint light filled the lines, bringing the old story to life. "These are not random pictures," Lena said softly. They are history. The pyramid is showing us what happened here. The explorers moved their lights across the walls. The glowing carvings formed scenes. One showed the long-armed creatures, the same as the skeletons lying on the floor, marching in lines under a black sky. Another showed them attacking smaller beings who held no weapons but carried bright symbols above their heads. The smaller figures looked weak compared to the warriors, but the carvings gave them a glow, as if they had some hidden power. Dan frowned. So the warriors tried to take something from those glowing ones. Myra nodded. And maybe the glowing ones were the builders of this place. The next scene showed battle. The sharp-armed warriors stormed toward the pyramid, their long limbs cutting through the air. The glowing figures stood at the entrance, raising their hands. From their palms shot beams of light, forming walls of energy. The warriors struck, but the walls did not break. Tom stared at the carvings in awe. That is how they trapped them. They lured the invaders inside and sealed them forever. The last image showed the pyramid shining across the desert, locking the warriors inside. Above it, stars circled in the same pattern as the carvings outside. The message was clear. The pyramid was not a tomb. It was a prison built to hold an army. Lena touched the wall gently. This place is not just a memory. It is a warning to anyone who comes later. The builders wanted others to know what they had faced. The seal pulsed again, stronger this time, almost blinding. The explorers shielded their eyes. When the light faded, a new carving appeared below the gate symbol. It showed a figure that looked almost human, smaller than the others but standing tall. Around the figure was a circle of light, brighter than anything else on the wall. The team stared at it in silence. That looks like us, Dan said at last. His voice carried both wonder and unease. Myra studied the figure carefully. It means the pyramid has seen us. It is telling us we are part of this story now. Tom's hand shook as he adjusted his scanner. The device beeped wildly, lines of energy rising from the floor. Something is unlocking, he said. The explorers turned quickly. At the far end of the chamber, stone slabs slid apart with grinding noise. A hidden passage opened, glowing faintly with the same light as the seal. Dust filled the air, and the sound of moving stone echoed through the chamber like thunder. Dan's jaw tightened. Another passage means another trial. Or another truth, Myra said. Her voice was calm but firm. We came here to learn, and now the pyramid is inviting us to go deeper. They approached the opening carefully. The air coming from the new passage was colder, carrying the smell of stone untouched for ages. The light on the walls guided them forward, slow and steady, as if the pyramid wanted them to follow. As they walked through the passage, the silence remained, but it felt different here. It was not heavy like before. It was waiting, like a question yet to be answered. The tunnel led them into a second chamber. This one was smaller but brighter. The walls glowed with clear images instead of faint lines. The carvings showed stars, planets, and vast fleets of ships moving across the galaxy. The explorers could not believe their eyes. These are not just stories, Lena whispered. These are maps. Tom ran his scanner over the walls. The stars match systems we know. But some of them, some are far beyond what we have ever reached. Myra walked to the center of the chamber. A large stone pillar stood there, covered in glowing circles. She touched one, and the light spread across the pillar, showing moving shapes. It was a vision of space, stars turning slowly, planets spinning, and strange fleets drifting through the void. The explorers stood amazed. Humanity had traveled far, but this knowledge was greater than anything Earth had ever recorded. Then the vision shifted. It showed the same sharp-armed warriors, rising again in numbers, their ships spreading across the stars. The scene ended with the glowing pyramid standing alone, its seal pulsing brighter than before. Lena's voice trembled. "The builders are telling us the enemy may return." Myra stepped back from the pillar. Her eyes burned with determination. "And if they return, humanity must be ready. That is why the pyramid is showing us all this. It wants to see if we are worthy to carry this warning forward." The team fell silent. The meaning of the message was clear now. This was more than a discovery. It was a call. And deep inside the pyramid, the next test was already waiting. The explorers stood in the second chamber, their eyes fixed on the glowing pillar. The images of stars and fleets still circled slowly before fading into silence. For a moment, no one spoke. The air was cold, but their hearts beat fast with the weight of what they had seen. Dan finally broke the silence. "We have the message. We should leave before this place decides to test us again." But before Myra could answer, the ground trembled. The walls flickered with sudden light, and a low rumble echoed through the chambers behind them. Dust fell from the ceiling, and the explorers turned quickly toward the tunnel they had entered. "What is happening?" Lena asked, clutching her scanner tightly. Tom's screen filled with flashing signals. "The energy is moving. It's spreading back to the first chamber." They rushed to the tunnel entrance and looked through. Their lights reached into the great hall filled with bones, and what they saw made their blood run cold. The skeletons were stirring. One by one, piles of bones trembled and shifted. Skulls tilted upward, ribs rattled, and arms dragged across the stone floor. A faint glow sparked inside their hollow eyes, the same light that had flickered in the single skeleton earlier. But now it was not one. It was many. The explorers stepped back. The sound of bones scraping against stone grew louder, echoing through the chamber like an army waking from endless sleep. "They are rising," Dan whispered, his hands tightening around his tool. Myra forced herself to stay calm. "Remember what we saw. This is not just an attack. It is part of the test." The first skeleton stood fully, its long arms stretching out, bones clicking together as if held by invisible strings. Then another rose, and another, until dozens were on their feet. They did not rush forward. Instead, they stood in silence, watching the humans with their faint glowing eyes. Lena shook her head. "They are waiting. Just like before." The glowing seal on the wall pulsed again, brighter than ever. Its light spread across the chamber, and the skeletons responded by stepping forward in slow, steady rhythm. The explorers backed into the smaller chamber, their lights darting across the moving figures. The skeletons filled the great hall like an unending tide, their steps echoing as one. Dan raised his tool. "If they come any closer, we fight." "Wait," Myra said quickly. Her voice was sharp but steady. "Fighting is what their enemy would do. That may be part of the trial. If we act like them, we may fail. But if we do nothing, they'll crush us," Dan argued. Tom's scanner beeped wildly. "There's a pattern," he said. His eyes stayed glued to the screen. "The energy is not random. It's like the pyramid is controlling them. It wants to see how we react." The skeletons reached the edge of the tunnel. They stopped there, silent and still, blocking the only way back. Their empty eyes glowed faintly in the dark, waiting for the humans to make their move. Myra lifted her chin. "Then we show them who we are. We show them we are not the same as the warriors who died here. Slowly, she lowered her light to the ground and raised her empty hands. She stepped forward into the tunnel, facing the silent army. Myra, no, Lena whispered. But Myra did not stop. She stood tall before the glowing eyes and spoke clearly, her voice steady and calm. We are not your enemy. We are seekers of knowledge. We came here to learn, not to destroy. For a long moment, nothing happened. The skeletons stood unmoving, their eyes glowing faintly. The silence was so deep the explorers could hear their own hearts. Then one skeleton stepped forward. Its bones clicked as it raised an arm. For an instant, Dan tensed, ready to strike. But instead of attacking, the skeleton pointed again toward the glowing seal. The explorers turned. The seal shifted, chains breaking apart in light until only the circle remained. A path of glowing lines spread across the floor, leading deeper into the pyramid. Lena gasped. It wants us to go further. The skeleton lowered its arm. Slowly, all the others stepped back, their glowing eyes dimming until only faint sparks remained. One by one, they sank to the floor again, folding into silence like broken puppets. Soon the chamber was still, filled only with piles of bones once more. The explorers breathed heavily, relief and awe mixing inside them. Dan let out a long sigh. That was too close. Myra turned to the others, her face calm but determined. Now we know. This pyramid is watching everything we do. It is not only a prison. It is a judge. And it is choosing whether humanity is worthy of what lies inside. Lena looked at the glowing path stretching before them. Then the real trial has only just begun. The team gathered their lights and stepped onto the glowing path, leaving the silent chamber of skeletons behind. The pyramid had tested their fear and their choice of violence. Now it was opening the way to the next trial, deeper and darker than anything they had faced. The explorers followed the glowing path into a new chamber. This one was wider than any they had seen. The walls curved high above them, smooth and black, but glowing lines traced patterns across the stone. The light pulsed slowly, almost like a heartbeat, and the air felt heavy with energy. Myra took the lead, her eyes scanning the walls for carvings or clues. The pyramid is guiding us, she said quietly. It wants us here for a reason. Dan carried the equipment, his steps careful. I still don't like this, he muttered. It feels like the walls are alive. It is alive, Lena said softly, staring at the glowing patterns. It is testing us. That is why the skeleton stopped. That is why the seal opened the path. Now it will see what we are made of. The explorers walked deeper into the chamber, their lights reflecting off the smooth walls. Suddenly, the floor beneath them changed. The glowing lines shifted and spread, forming shapes that lifted into the air like visions. At first, the images were small and simple. They showed distant worlds, burning cities, and ships falling through space. Then the visions grew larger, moving faster. Battles unfolded, civilizations crumbling, and strange alien figures appeared, some attacking, some defending. Tom gasped. These are histories. Real wars. Or maybe warnings of what can happen in the future. Myra studied the visions carefully. The pyramid is showing us consequences. It wants to see how we react. The chamber pulsed with light, and the explorers suddenly found themselves surrounded by visions that filled every corner. The glowing images of battles shifted to more personal scenes. They saw images of humans making choices, helping each other, and sometimes failing. The pyramid seemed to ask silently, Would we fight only for ourselves, or would we help others even at risk? Dan's hands shook. How do we pass this? What does it want from us? Myra stepped forward. It is not about weapons. It is about courage, intelligence, and unity. It is testing our minds, our hearts, and our teamwork. The visions became even more intense. The explorers saw endless space, stars exploding, and fleets of ships clashing. They saw humans trapped on distant planets, calling for help, and some who refused to help in fear. Every choice had a consequence, and every failure repeated itself in the visions. Lena felt tears in her eyes. We have to choose wisely. Every action matters. Myra nodded. Together. We decide together. The explorers joined hands for a moment, steadying themselves. Then they spoke clearly, as one. They promised to help those in need, to fight not for glory, but for knowledge and protection, to act with courage, and to face danger without selfish fear. The chamber grew brighter. The vision slowed and then paused. The glowing lines of the walls traced a circle around them, connecting every pulse of light into a single pattern. The pyramid seemed to hum, testing if their words were true. Then the visions shifted again. This time, they saw the sharp-armed warriors from the skeletons, rising again in energy, ready to spread across the stars. The explorers' promise was tested further. The visions showed paths of war and peace. Every choice seemed possible, but the explorers held fast, showing determination, teamwork, and courage. Finally, the walls pulsed one last time. The light poured down onto the explorers, bathing them in a glow that warmed their hearts instead of frightening them. The visions faded. The chamber grew still. The explorers looked around, stunned. The pyramid had accepted them. The glowing lines shifted into a single path, leading to another chamber, smaller and quieter this time. At its center lay a stone pedestal, smooth and shining with pale light. On the pedestal rested a small cube of black stone. Its edges glowed faintly, and it hummed softly as the explorers approached. Myra reached out and touched it. The moment her fingers met the surface, images and knowledge flowed into her mind. She saw stars, alien worlds, and hidden secrets of the galaxy. The knowledge was not dangerous, but it was vast, beyond what they could have imagined. Dan stepped forward, and the same energy passed through him. Lena and Tom followed. They all felt the power, and they all understood that the pyramid had given humanity a choice. They could take this knowledge and use it wisely, or ignore it and leave it untouched. Myra looked at the others. We passed the trial. The pyramid trusts us now. It has chosen us to carry this knowledge forward. We are responsible for what comes next. The explorers stood silently, feeling both awe and humility. The pyramid had tested their courage, their hearts, and their unity. They had faced visions of destruction, war, and fear, and they had not faltered. Outside the chamber, the skeletons remained still, silent witnesses to the human success. The pyramid had judged them and found them worthy. Myra finally spoke. We came here to explore, to learn, and to discover. Now we understand that humanity can be more than just survivors. We can be guardians. This is our chance to prove what we are capable of. The explorers left the chamber slowly, carrying the cube of knowledge with care. The glowing path behind them dimmed, but they felt the pyramid's presence guiding them forward, deeper into the secrets it held. The trial was over. Humanity had been tested, and humanity had passed. The explorers stepped into the final chamber. The air was still, warm, and filled with soft light. Unlike the earlier chambers, this one was quiet and calm. The walls shimmered faintly, showing patterns of stars and planets, but no images of battles or warnings. It felt as if the pyramid itself had approved their passage. Myra carried the glowing black cube carefully. She felt its energy vibrating softly in her hands. It was not heavy, but it contained knowledge beyond their understanding. She glanced at Dan, Lena, and Tom. Their eyes reflected awe and determination. "This is it," Myra said softly. "Everything the pyramid wanted to show us is here. We have earned it." Dan nodded. "It is more than we could have imagined. All the battles, the tests, the skeletons, they were preparing us for this moment." The team approached the center of the chamber. The cube floated slightly above a stone pedestal, as if waiting for them to recognize its importance. Myra placed it carefully on the pedestal. The moment it touched the surface, light spread across the walls. The stars and planets shimmered, connecting to one another like a vast network. Suddenly, the cube projected images into the chamber. They saw entire galaxies, planets filled with life, and civilizations thriving and falling. They saw maps of stars unknown to humans, energy systems capable of incredible power, and knowledge of technology far beyond anything Earth had ever created. "This is a gift," Lena whispered. Her eyes shone with wonder. "The pyramid has chosen us to understand and protect this knowledge." Tom adjusted his scanner. "It's not just information. It's a guide. A way to grow without repeating the mistakes of the past." Myra looked at the group. "The pyramid has shown us what humanity can become. Not just explorers, but guardians, thinkers, and leaders who can face the unknown without fear." The chamber seemed to pulse with approval. The soft lights flowed like waves, brushing against the explorers as if the pyramid was touching them, congratulating them. Dan bent down and touched one of the glowing walls. "The skeletons, the armies, the battles, they were all tests. And we passed because we worked together, and we did not give in to fear." "Yes," Myra said. "It is not strength alone that matters. It is courage, intelligence, and unity. The pyramid knows that humans can achieve greatness if we choose the right path." The explorers spent time studying the glowing projections. They could not absorb everything at once, but they understood the importance of what they had found. It was not just knowledge for themselves. It was a legacy for all of humanity. Myra lifted her gaze to the ceiling of the chamber. "We must protect this. Share it carefully, wisely. Humanity is being given a chance to grow beyond what we ever thought possible." Lena nodded. "We are the first humans to carry this responsibility. We cannot fail." Tom pointed toward a passage at the far end of the chamber. "This leads back to the surface. The pyramid has given us what it promised. It is time to go home." As they followed the passage, the glowing walls dimmed behind them. The skeletons in the first chambers remained silent, still as stone. They had witnessed humanity pass the ultimate test and now rested forever in their chamber. When the explorers emerged from the pyramid, the sun was rising over the desert planet. The golden light touched the black stone of the pyramid, making it shine with a quiet brilliance. The explorers looked at each other, hearts filled with hope and determination. Myra carried the cube carefully to the ship. She looked back at the pyramid, feeling a deep connection. "We have been chosen," she said. "And we will not let humanity fail this opportunity." Dan added, "The galaxy is vast. We have much to learn, and we have much to protect. But now, we have a guide and a direction." Lena smiled softly. "The pyramid's wisdom is now part of humanity. It will shape the future for generations to come. Tom looked at the horizon, where the desert stretched endlessly. We are small, but we have proven we can rise to great challenges. The pyramid has reminded us what humans can be. The explorers boarded their ship, the black cube safely secured. As the engines hummed to life, the desert planet faded beneath them. But the knowledge and courage they carried would remain forever. Humanity had been tested, and it had passed. The pyramid remained, quiet and eternal, waiting for the next worthy beings to discover its secrets. But for now, humans had claimed their legacy. They were no longer just visitors in the galaxy. They were guardians of knowledge, ready to face the stars with courage, wisdom, and unity. As the ship rose into the sky, the explorers looked forward, toward endless possibilities. The pyramid had shown them that humanity could rise above fear, face the unknown, and become something greater. They had proven that humans, when united and brave, could achieve greatness even in the face of ancient mysteries. Humanity's journey had only just begun, but for the first time, it carried a legacy older than itself, a legacy of courage, wisdom, and hope among the stars.